I would like to invite Mr. Anas Mohammed from SSL Cluster to quickly update us about the current situation of food security and livelihoods. So please, Anas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Shahar. Good evening, everybody. This is Anas Mohammed, Food Security Cluster Co-Coordinator with GOAL, as a GOAL is the co-lead for the FSL Cluster. Yeah, it's a very important point actually and topic for the climate change that's happened and its impact on the food security. In general, our hub we are working in Northwest Syria, mainly in Idlib, Aleppo, then part of let's say Raqqa and Hasaka, just four sub-districts. The efforts or the work that our partners are working is in 40 sub-districts. We have around 80 FSL partners who used to work in this area. As a cluster, we have like a strategic objective and sector objective. Actually, we have 3 sector objectives, mainly one for the food aid, the SO1, the sector objective 1, the second or the sector objective 2, which is on the livelihood on the household level. Then the sector objective 3, we can see that livelihood in the community level. We then as meetings, and we have a meeting with our partners, monthly meeting, around 8 meetings actually. Now it's a teleworking, so and online, so we are meeting with partners for the FSL cluster meetings. Then we have technical working groups, agriculture technical group, bread and bakery coordination group, and livestock working group, in addition to the area coordination groups. In general, Dr. Shahar, as you may know, that as a total population in Northwest Syria is reached to 4.6 million people in Northwest Syria in 40 sub-districts. Out of this number, we have 3.4 million people classified as a people in need. Then out of these people, we have 2.8 million people as IDPs. Then out of them, 1.7 million are living in 1,385 IDP sites according to CCM clusters. So the intervention mainly in the food aid, monthly our partners reach to around 1.8 million people through the food aid. 80%, we can see that 80% of them from UN, mainly WFP and SGF. Then as a cumulative, recently we have around 300,000 people reached by the livelihood activities such as the agriculture, livestock, and irrigation. To talk about the climate change, we actually, it's a very important topic. The impact that we have noticed, that we have received through our partners, as you know, the low rainfall that's happened, the late raining that took place in the last period, comparing with the previous years, it was the lowest rate of the rain. Then, as you know, that Syria is under like 5 agroecological zones, which is even sometimes lead to especially in the first and second zones, there's a high level of raining, lead last year for floods, for example. So there's the main impact of the climate change. We can say that it's the low productivity of the lands. We have noted that the wheat, which the main indicators for us, had low productivity comparing with the previous years. You may know that Syria before 2011, the national production for Syria was around 4.5 million tons, and now a decrease actually maybe to around 1 million, 1.2 million, according to the non-official figures that came from the SPEG and GOSEM, the technical bodies who are working in the agriculture and wheat especially. As an effort that with what we are doing, we have encouraged our partner to cope with this situation related to the like supporting with the supplementary irrigations, providing them with encouraging the livelihood activity, cultivation, provide the agriculture inputs for farmers, supporting the all the UN efforts actually that's having to help farmers, help people, either ITPs or host community to help themselves. I will not take long time, Dr. Shah, from introduction. Of course, this point will be discussed and happy to provide any other clarification or answer any question related to the cluster efforts or partners efforts. Thank you very much, and my pleasure to be with you in this panel. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Anas, for this great updates on the current situation. Actually, SSL cluster is a coalition of the international and national NGOs working on food security and livelihoods. They provide a great job and really appreciate your work as Anas and also all the SSL partners. So we can move now to the first speaker, Professor Lisa Bowen. Yes, hi Lisa.
Hi.
Yes, thank you for your coming. So you are co-host, you can share your screen and please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shahar. So just while I'm sharing the screen, and hopefully you'll let me know if you can see this okay?
Yes, it's fine.
Fine, thank you very much. It's a real privilege to be here. Thanks, Shahar, for organizing this and for inviting me to be part of this. My name's Lisa Bowen. I'm a professor at the University of Edinburgh. I'm holding a chair in population medicine and veterinary public health policy. And I work with Shahar and others who are on this call in something called the One Health Field Network for Fragile and Conflict Affected States, which is an international collaboration between ourselves and many of the people on the line. And Shahar has kindly invited me to talk about food security enhancement priorities under climate change and COVID in Northwest Syria. And I've decided, I think, on looking at the other speakers who are going to give you some very practical and very important messages about specific aspects of this, which I think from their own personal experiences, I thought that taking a broad approach and trying to introduce, if you like, a framework to start to think about these issues would be a good start and a welcome introduction, I hope. So I'm framing this really around a One Health approach, which I hope many of you will have heard before and be familiar with. It's really, if you like, an invitation to consider how COVID-19 and climate change are not exogenous shocks as they're sometimes configured. So where I want to start with is the challenge really about how we think about the biopolitics of the Syrian food security system. And as I mentioned, the starting place or the entry point is that COVID-19 and climate change aren't these exogenous shocks, but rather endogenous shocks to a system because you're not already in a healthy global economy. And as a starting point to that, I think we need to consider together, and I guess I would invite your feedback on this about how Syrian society is located within the global economy and what structural elements of the Syrian specificity are important as a way of responding to these types of endogenous shocks. So, for example, as you already know, you have this very long conflict, which has a very intricate genealogy, combined with a long-standing drought, but with recent changes, which are as a result of climate change, and then further exacerbated by the COVID-19 lockdown and vaccination. And I was very interested to hear the first speaker in terms of talking about the numbers of people in particular areas. So I wanted just to highlight, of course, the inequity in the vaccination status of Syria as a whole, but in particular the small numbers of doses that are administered in the northwest and also in northeast Syria. So this is our starting point, if you like. in the work that Shaher and I and others do, our aim really is to trace the connection between these types of epidemics, environmental degradation, and Syrian society as internal to global modernity. In other words, as internal to a new global health paradigm, in order to think about and have a conversation around mobilizing alternative social arrangements which can improve, if you like, resilience to climate change and other such things. And in doing so, let me just move my mouse so that I can see this a bit better. In doing so, one of the things that we are doing is a number of projects, or we're involved in another number of projects around the future of food security in Syria, and in particular, exploring One Health in a warming climate. So our objective is looking at improving long-term preparedness for One Health threats. One Health meaning that interconnectedness between the environment, animals, and people, and thinking about health in that broadest of context, not just the absence of disease, but also in terms of food security and well-being. And the reason for doing this is to trace, if you like, the impact of those One Health threats on food security by looking at these networks of agricultural knowledge around food security and sustainable development. And what's important to do in that context is then to think about projects that co-create academic knowledge of the social relations between animals, people, and the environment that is co-primordial with local knowledge or local lore. And that's important because, of course, the specificity of Syrian society is locally established, and it contrasts, and there's a tension, I guess, against these macro level themes of preparedness as a result of the fact that there's this fissure, if you like, in the macro structure, thinking about the state versus opposition and individuals, when actually preparedness really requires, at least in a global context, state-led and value-based initiatives. And then within that, of course, thinking about the primacy of data-driven monitoring and knowledge production for wealth production versus locally led decision-making, and then the issues around land stewardship and management juxtaposed with displacement, conflict, and climate variability, as well as the administration of those epidemics. I can't see, but just to make sure that, is this okay for translation? I just realized that, just maybe shout out if I'm going too fast.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, maybe a little slowly.
Okay, I'll move a little bit more slowly.
Yeah.
Thank you. So the work that we do together is really trying to anchor any interventions that might be made to further preparedness for food security to the history and culture of agriculture, food production, and consumption. So on the right-hand side, you'll see this grid where we're looking at collective memories, moving into preparedness against or to mitigate these current One Health challenges, such as climate change and COVID, by promoting locally led decision-making and practitioner-led social and technological interventions, such that we can then inform for the future these transition pathways which move from emergency aid to longer-term strategic planning through that incorporation of local and culturally relevant expertise. The theoretical framework for this work, again, you can see on the left-hand side those arrows, which take us back to this idea of thinking about cultural heritage and local knowledge into One Health challenges and then into food futures, is really based on this broad notion of health, which is conceived in a very, in the widest sense possible. So thinking about health and One Health, not just as the absence of disease, but in terms of the absence of disease plus well-being. And we have aligned our goals to the Sustainable Development Goals, which you can see in that circle. So thinking about partnerships, building partnerships together that are both international and local, thinking about food security and safety as it's tied and connected to gender equality, as it relates back to natural resource management and health and well-being of the people, as well as their livestock, and then linking that back into livelihoods and labor. And in terms of thinking about this, I suppose one of the things that I've been thinking about is that we are using this framework not just to think about food security resilience, but we're also asking ourselves questions about the longer term determinants which shape those social and cultural relations between humans, animals, and the environment. We want to ask questions about uneven social geographies. We want to question what it means for livelihood establishment, so questioning globalization and economic growth, which might be drivers of inequity in the first place. And we also want to question really this anthropocentric worldview that dominates knowledge creation. Part of the work that we've done in the Syrian Food Futures Project is to look at long-term trends. And on the right-hand side there, you're going to see a table which looks at food system trends in the global context and then in the Syrian context. And all of you who work in the food security cluster will be aware of these. But importantly, of course, we're thinking about demographic shifts in terms of farmer demographics, the entrance of new entrant farmers and greater numbers of women, attracting them into agriculture. Thinking about the inequality of wealth and the impact that poverty has and the reliance on small producers who are growing strategic crops and perhaps producing livestock, particularly small ruminants. We are interested but haven't really established a lot of work in undernourishment and micronutrient deficiencies. But in this presentation and in this webinar, you're going to hear a lot about the depletion of natural resources, in particular around water poverty, and perhaps also about energy and fuel. And then I just wanted to acknowledge the two characteristics at the bottom about, of course, the instability that continues, which has an impact on trade and migration, and of course, the impact that has on technological stagnation and the capacity to capitalize on emerging technologies with or without different types of investment. Coming from those larger trends, the work that we've done together in a participatory way is to bring people together in a number of roundtable discussions to highlight critical uncertainties. And I won't go through all of these in detail, but the three major areas that we focused on were on displacement, natural resources, and agricultural policy, and looking specifically at some high impact drivers. So for example, in displacement on that top row, you'll see the lack of access to academic expertise, the lack of access to extension services, and perhaps the role of women in the workforce. And I probably want to highlight on the bottom row the needs that are introduced, which are quite specific when thinking about prioritizing food security and enhancing that for the future. So those needs around displacement have to do with information sharing and trust, building educational models, and gender balance. And when it comes to natural resource management, thinking about different types of innovation, which I think other members of this webinar will touch on with respect to climate, smart agriculture, private sector investment, and thinking about multidisciplinary projects which allow you to think about cross-cutting unintended consequences. And finally, then thinking about holistic agricultural policy reform, so a combination of both top-down and bottom-up approaches which are required. In the workshops that we've held, we've tried to explore the future of food security together with thinking and trying to conceive of what is required to reach a desirable future in the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years. And the graph on the left, which is circled in orange, are the three axes or the critical drivers around which we've explored this. So thinking about natural resource management in terms of whether it's we're moving towards sustainability or opposed to resource exploitation. Agricultural policies, looking at combinations of bottom-up and top-down approaches, and then displacement in terms of where participants felt and hoped they'd be in 5 years' time. And the olive little symbol represents where participants felt that was a plausible place to be in the next 3 to 5 years. So some movement really to the left of all three of those axes. And the reason for the inclusion of the image on the right is just to show how those interactions work, how you might conceive of a longer term future. And we use that future then to think about our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, so using a SWOT approach. And I'm not going to go into this in detail because I know that I'm probably running out of time. But that SWOT approach was then used to then try to define some strategies which are smart in nature. So thinking about things that could be implemented today in order to be able to achieve that desirable future. What I want to end on this slide is just talking about some high-level approaches to strategy development. I think before you get into any interventions for food security, one of the things that is an invitation really to discuss is to look at the tensions between these emerging paradigms of global public policy, which has been prompted by the COVID response and also the response to climate change emergencies, and how that creates a tension, but also an opportunity for collective action at a community level. So there's an opportunity here to link knowledge networks into a pathway for food security innovation in a One Health context. The second important sort of high-level thing that we might want to consider, or that you might want to discuss, is how we might reimagine an agricultural network pathway. So recognizing the gendered nature of knowledge creation and the appeal to agricultural innovations, how we might horizontally connect the local, transnational, and also external expertise, how we might vertically connect academic knowledge to local knowledge through that of the NGOs and other partners, and how we might think about and refound Syrian higher education around principles of knowledge co-creation and the critical assessment of those, if you like, international guidelines on food security innovation. So in other words, how might you want to co-construct a One Health framework for the Syrian context as a means to scaffolding your higher education towards food security? And the last point I wanted to make is that that it's then important, I think, in any strategy to look at the reach and the impact of those resulting networks of agricultural knowledge into different types of institutional decision making at local, regional, and national levels. With that, I'm going to stop here and pause and just see if there's, I don't know if you're taking questions, Shahar, but just to reiterate that that was a high-level approach. I don't proclaim to know the answers to this, but hopefully it's an introduction to a further conversation that's led by you about some of these priorities, and hopefully complementary to what some of the others will have to say about climate change and interventions to address this for food security. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Much appreciated to give us such summarize about the previous work. I can imagine that some of the participants here know about the work. And by the way, the One Health Network is a group of international academics led by Edinburgh University. And we organized a round table. We invite some of the actors in food security and livelihoods, I think 2 years ago. And we planned actually to have workshop and scenario planning training here in Gaziantep, but again, COVID-19 didn't allow us to do this. But we still hope that we can do this in the near future. Many thanks for you. Lisa, please, if you have any question, then after the speakers, then we will open the floor for your question, or you can now write your questions in the chat box. Thank you, Lisa, again. Yes, now we move to Dr. Tafida. Dr. Tafida, could you please introduce yourself? And yes, the floor is yours. Can you share your screen also?
Thank you so much. I believe many of you, we already met and we already know each others. I am Dr. Tefide Kızıldeniz. And I used to work for FAO and for cross-border programs, and that's why I used to work with many of you. Now I am in the Niğde Ömer Halis Demir University. Meanwhile, I am supporting still the Syrian projects, cross-border projects in terms of food security and livelihood cluster. And my specialization is climate change. I also studied for gender, and I was also, let's say, gender expert in FAO and also PSCA expert. So I'm still continuing that way, and I'm continue also scientific research for climate change. And today I would like to explain you some main climate changes and adaptation and mitigation mechanisms. I don't know if you can see my screen clearly. Dr. Sheher, can you see
Yes.
my?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
perfect.
fine. Yeah.
Perfect. So, as I mentioned, I studied climate change effects, especially on the crops. That's why I'm still continue for it. And we have a university, in the university webpage, we have a web page for our works that you can see more details about it. So let's talk about that, as we are always talking. What is climate? Climate is the average weather pattern over a longer period of time. So what we mean when we say climate change is a significant change in weather patterns. So what is this climate change causes? There is external causes like solar activities, Earth's orbits and meteorites, and there's internal causes, and natural causes, and also anthropogenic causes. So we cannot, as a human being, we cannot, manage these changes, natural and external causes, but anthropogenic causes is mainly because of us. So what is climate change? Is an effect of human activities. It's a major ecological, social, and economic problem of the planet. So its effects, when we are talking about the climate change effects, we are talking about increasing temperature, widespread melting of snows and ice, rising global sea levels, decreasing or increasing rainfall patterns, changing species, biodiversity distribution, plant vulnerability and mortality, affecting crops, yield, and storage. So it is also associated directly or indirectly to mainly three factors: elevated CO2, temperature increase, and drought, inundation. So how we can link this direct and indirect link with these three factors? This is the emissions of greenhouse gases. As you can see, the carbon dioxide with 84% is the main gases, and then methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases. So when we are talking about the climate change, the main climate change related factors is carbon dioxide. So how this is affecting? Also, you can hear several times greenhouse effect. I just would like to just quick mention how this greenhouse effect is working. Sunlight is coming through the atmosphere to the earth, and it's warm the earth. So it's normally supposed to reflect, infrared radiation is supposed to reflect. However, when this atmospheric layer is more thick with carbon dioxide that causes greenhouse gases, this reflection is not happen, and it is staying inside the earth. That is why it is calling greenhouse effect. Increasing levels of carbon dioxide is increase the amount of heat retained in the earth. So these are the main climate change effects, greenhouse gases effects when we are talking. So I would like to just mention, so how this directly greenhouse gas emissions affect from agriculture. I just have this graphic from FAO. As you can see, the enterogenic fermentation activities, this is the agricultural practice activities, how they are contributing to climate change, and manure management, as you can see, rice cultivation, manure left on pasture, manure applied to soil, synthetic fertilizers, burning crop residues, burning savanna, cultivated organic soils, crop residues. So these are the main, maybe there are more, but these are just major, let's say, agricultural practices that are contributing to climate change. So we are again in the climate change. I'm just trying to make this climate change. So there is climate change related factors. These factors are temperature and precipitation, mainly water availability. And also here, this is again one figure from FAO. Carbon dioxide is here. It's related to ocean acidification, but this is not only ocean acidification, because we know carbon dioxide is main factor for photosynthesis for the crops. It's also directly linked to the agro-ecosystem. When we are talking also water availability, precipitation, temperature, they are the most feeling in the field. As Dr. Enes was mentioning, inside Syria, how they're affecting. So agroecosystem, we are not only mentioning livestock and only the crops as well. There is the pests and disease. They are also increased with these factors. So these figures are just showing how these climate change related factors are linked to the agroecosystems. So it's affecting cultivated plants, livestock, forests, and aquatic species. And this is directly linked to the agricultural productivity and post-harvest. It's changing the price, high price, because low quality and low amount of the products, quantity and quality. So it's affecting market and trades. So it is reducing, increasing food prices and income of the farmers. So it is directly linked to the food security and nutrition. So you can tell me, professors, you are saying very good with all these factors. However, how we can prevent this, how we can take the measurements with agricultural activities. So there is an approach called climate smart agriculture. That is, the forestry and fisheries seek to the sustainably increase productivity, adapt to climate change, build resilience. This build resilience is the key word to shocks and variability. When we are mentioning variability, it means adaptation. We are searching ways to adapt ourselves to changing climate and reduce and remove greenhouse gases. As we mentioned, greenhouse gases, main gas is carbon dioxide. So we are generally trying to reduce carbon dioxide. So these activities also called mitigation and enhance the achievement of national food security and development goals. So we mentioned here two factors, adaptation and mitigation. So we need to know what is this. Adaptation to climate change requires making adjustments to prepare for climate variability and changing average climate conditions in order to moderate harm and exploit beneficial opportunities. It means adaptation can also take place in response to climate change impacts. So how we can do that? Both risk management and change management plays the roles. So we need to know these two concepts, risk management and change management. Disaster risk management focus on preventing, mitigating, and preparing for and responding to the shocks in short-term and medium-term scale, while change management as a strategic long-term. So we have short and medium-term plan, and we have a long-term plan with preventing, mitigating, and preparing. Both perspectives are interrelated and mutually complementary, providing incentives to modify behaviors and practices over the medium to long term, then optimizing current conditions and minimizing the vulnerability of women and men to future changes. Trade-offs, which may be gender-specific, might need to be made. So, how we can do in agricultural interventions. So this is the key, because we are just talking now all these scientific terms and we are trying to understand how this climate change happen and what we can do. In real agricultural interventions, I just give generally applied 4 main interventions. It's agroforestry, integrated systems agricultures, and sustainable forestry and rehabilitation of degraded pastures. I just want to give you a very quick picture of it. Integrated crop livestock forestry systems is to more diverse and agricultural systems. So there isn't any one crop, one kind of crop. We are integrating systems, combine them into one of 4 combinations. It can be crops and livestock, it can be crops and forestry, it can be livestock and forestry, or crops, livestock, and forestry. In this way, however, the effect of climate change can be hit very hard to the, for example, crops, still you have forestry that you can get still income, and you can be still building resilience, you can still stand for the food security. That's why this is important to not rely on one kind of production, so it will be diversified to continue food security. The second one is the rehabilitated degraded pastures. Degraded lands are prone to erosion and so retain less water. We mentioned again the water availability. So have less nutritious grass for feeding animals and contribute to low productivity livestock production. The most conventional way involves applying fertilizers, but again, This is not a unique way. Degraded pastures can be more sustainably recovered by planting native forage or grass, by introducing trees in the pasture to avoid soil erosion. So we are working more on the soil erosion for the rehabilitation of pastures. The third one is plant agroforestry system. In agroforestry system, every plant is selected for a particular purpose. Species are selected so that plants will not compete but collaborate. This diversity of crops and trees allows the area to be productive all year long, so that small farmers can earn income in all seasons. So we are making to earn agricultural products incomes all year. So not only working again one crops, it is also diversifying. The last one is pursue sustainably forestry. Trees planted sustainably offer environmental benefits such as capturing greenhouse gases and protecting the soils, as well as the potential for economic gain through the commercialization of timber and non-timber forest products. That were all adaptation strategies. Let's have a look at the mitigation, because in the beginning, when we are talking about climate smart agriculture activities, we also talk about the mitigation. That was referring climate change mitigations, referring to an anthropogenic intervention to reduce the sources or enhance the sink of greenhouse gases. Again, greenhouse gases, when we are talking, we are mainly talking about carbon dioxide. In other words, mitigation means taking action to reduce the causes of climate change by limiting the amount of heat-trapping gases that are emitted into the Earth's atmosphere. So, in agriculture activities, we have three approaches. One is emissions can be reduced. The second one, emissions can be avoided or displaced. The third one is sinks can be created to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store carbon. So let's have a look how we can do as an intervention. Reducing emissions as a first option, we can use with livestock sector. For example, emissions can to some extent be regulated by increasing the productivity per animal unit or through the implementation of certain production practices and more efficient use of feeds. In the crop and production, the use of inorganic fertilizers. If you remember my first PowerPoint that I was mentioning about the fertilizers, how they are contributing to the greenhouse gases. So we are reducing the inorganic fertilizers or in some cases replaced by organic fertilizers to reduce emissions. Additionally, technical changes in production systems and practices such as manure management and water management. That's just example in rice, for example. The other option for mitigation is the emissions can be avoided or displaced. To avoid emissions in the agriculture sector, energy efficiency needs improving in many systems. There is a diversity of different greenhouse gas mitigation strategies, which are highly specific to location and management practices. Through efficient household energy systems, greenhouse gas emissions can be displaced at relatively low cost. Solar energy, wind energy, etc. So I just would like to say some words for this, because I know in Syria, there is a trend to use solar energy systems in several different ways for the low cost energy systems, but there is some negative feedbacks for these solar energy systems. I know that it is getting so much attention if you put in the field, so the attention is highly fragile and sensitive environments, maybe it's not preferred. So this can be, maybe we can add here biogas systems. So small holders can use the small biogas systems as well instead of solar energy in this case, because these options also needs to be adapted to the location. In case of Syria, we need to consider in several different aspects as well. Well, the last one is the main potential for mitigation lies in enlarging carbon sinks, which can be described as natural carbon storage capable of sequestrating more carbon from the atmosphere than they emitted. For example, forests are an example of carbon sinks. there are different approaches to enlarging these carbon sinks in agriculture, such as increasing biomass by incorporating trees and bushes into farming systems, as is done in silvopastoral or agroforestry systems, for example. By restoring degraded soils, we also mentioned this for adaptation strategy, especially in vast grassland and pasture areas, and regulating animal numbers and improving pastures. The soil carbon sequestration rate is improved. So this is all I would like to mention for today. If you have any further questions, any further activities with details, because we have limits of time, so I am leaving here my email and also web page for climate change studies that we are doing. You can directly communicate with me if you have any further questions. So this is all from my side for today, Dr. Sheher.
Yes, thank you very much, Tafida. So in a short time, you gave us a lot of information, and even not only how we can react against climate change, but also I think to understand the reason why is these changes are happening. And so, thank you very much again. And as I mentioned before, so please feel free to write your question in the chat box, or then you have, you have time at the end to ask your questions. We will move now to Dr. Juliet. So also, for more simple, maybe, but very effective and practical, I would say, solutions. So, yes, Juliet, please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sheher. My name is Juliet Milliken. I'm the coordinator of Realliance, a small UK-based charity that looks at supporting regenerative solutions to disaster displacement and development. And we're currently working with Syrian academic expertise as partners on a very small pilot food growing project in the northwest of Syria as part of a regenerative response charity. And I'm going to give you a small example of one thing that can be done in response to some of the observations and recommendations that our previous speakers have already made. Our first speaker already spoke about changes in rainfall patterns, about water scarcity and drought, as well as occasional floods. Our second speaker spoke a lot about food security and the importance of local decision making, about the links between health and well-being, about needing to reverse the narrative of the Anthropocene, and we heard that from Tavita soon too, about the anthroposophic impacts on climate change, and how we need to reverse that narrative and see the care of people and the needs of people in relation to the needs of the planet. And our former speaker also spoke about the importance of building resilience in communities and localized seed production varieties and localized solutions. Lisa also spoke of the wish among Syrian communities to decrease displacement in the coming period. And yet we know that because of climate change, displacement is likely to only increase, and we need to get better at working with it. Our project is in the northwest of Syria, and we're growing food with communities in gardens. I'm not going to spend too long reviewing the context because our previous speakers have covered this already, but we know that we need to look for long-term solutions. We know that disaster risk reduction probably needs to shift to a focus on designing for resilience and recovery. Disasters will be there and risks will be there, and communities need to know how to take control of their own lives and their own food production in order to recover more quickly. And we also know that recovery from trauma that accompanies disaster and displacement is supported and enhanced by green and socially conducive environments, and often made worse by the alienation of artificial and rapidly produced settlements that the human response teams have for a long time been forced to create under pressure. But climate is only going to add to pressures in providing food in and outside of migration. Not only is it adding to displacement and adding to pressures on humanitarian response organizations, but such response organizations can make the context worse by the high carbon and CO2 emissions that go with large international, large-scale food recovery, water replacement responses, if these are not done in a way that takes account of context and is regenerative in the longer term. All humanitarian and response organizations operate under the SPHERE guidelines, and in recent years, the notion of sustainability and sustainable design has been added to the SPHERE guidelines, and Tefek spoke about some of these initiatives to ensure sustainability. But in Realliance, we look at not only being sustainable or sustaining what is, we need to go beyond that. Our situation is far worse than that, and we need to really start looking at how our actions and those of the people we work with can regenerate the planet while living on it, not only to sustain what is, but to try to support and put back some of the biospheres and ecological contexts that existed before the damage that has been done by our generation and by our parents' generation. I'm going to introduce you briefly to the importance of the gardens and why to garden in displacement. We're not unique in that respect. Prior to the work that we're doing with Syrian academic expertise, I worked for a number of years with an organization called Lemon Tree Trust, providing gardens in displacement with Syrian communities in northern Iraq. But we know too that gardening has spread throughout many response and international organizations, and that many of those gardens are now being set up, for example, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Cox's Bazar, in Bangladesh. But we try to look at that gardening in a way that does not make the context worse, but replenishes the soil as well as providing food. So gardens give us lots of things. They give us food, they improve our environment, they give us a sense of identity, and they give us meaningful occupation. Those of us who are gardeners in our own context know what a life-sustaining and life-enhancing thing it can be to spend time with plants, outside with our feet in the soil. But in displacement, where people are denied access to their own land, their own countries, and a sense of belonging, this becomes even more important. And beyond that, we know that Syrians are cultivators and have always been cultivators. So to take away the opportunity for cultivation is to take away a fundamental part of life. And in a former analysis that I did of the gardens in Iraq while I was working there in 2019, the response was overwhelming, that gardening not only produced food, but contributed significantly to trauma healing, to recovery, and to a sense of belonging, even on a temporary basis in the environment in which people found themselves. We use what is broadly called a permaculture approach, and permaculture is a system of design based on 3 principles of earth care, people care, and fair share. And many of those principles reverberate with the recommendation that Lisa and Tefek have shared with us in the need for passing back control and giving time to people to make decisions in their own environment because they know best their needs, their context, and the context of their soils. But Syrians traditionally have not gardened with a permaculture approach. So working with Syrian academic expertise in these 3 gardens in the northwest of Syria, we've looked at trying to introduce this because it has fundamental benefits, not only for the environment itself, but for people's health and for the continuity of the project beyond the period of international external support. It's a design system that works with closed system thinking, working without external inputs and therefore external costs, based on a series of principles around design that can be easily learned and using materials that are not only available and cost-free or of minimal cost, but come from and are based in the space and the place where people are living. It's a system and a design that tries to save material inputs and time and work with nature and in harmony with nature, reusing water in a place where water is scarce, reusing food waste to replenish soil, reusing seeds to prevent the need for the purchase of external and foreign and amended varieties of seeds, and providing fresh, organic, nutritional food, which make a difference not only to food price, but also to people's health. We found in Syria that people, sorry, in these gardens in the northwest of Syria, that people are also trying to make space to grow medicinal and culinary herbs, so they can make their food taste better and taste the way that they want to eat, and to also take more control themselves and their health. Yes, please. Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
Yes, Juliet.
My connection is good.
Yes.
Would you like me to stand closer to my computer or to use a microphone? Is that better?
Yes, so it's fine. Just maybe closer to microphone.
Okay, we have on the right here, and I need to explain this to you, a beautiful picture of the school garden and one of the school children who is learning to cultivate there. So the gardens in the area are home gardens. We're supporting, or Shaher and his team are supporting families to grow alongside and outside their homes in container gardens. They're supporting families to grow on a slightly larger scale, on plots, on an allotment that is part of a larger community plot. And they're working with Dr. Ezra, who's with us today. I shouldn't be talking about this. She should be talking about this. Is working with the school to support the children to grow food in the school. Here is a picture of a host community house, rather than one of the houses provided to IDPs in displacement, but it shows you growing in containers outside of that house and how that growing in containers can happen in a small space and significantly improve what is often a sparse environment. And the last picture that I have to show you is of the very lush garden outside the school where Dr. Ezra is working, and where children are learning to work in that garden themselves, learning about food production, feeding their families, working together as a group of young people, and taking some of those practices home to teach them to their families, so that organic and a permaculture approach that doesn't require external and CO2 producing fertilizers, but uses organic fertilizers which replenish the soil at almost no cost from locally produced waste, can be used to enhance nutritional food in different ways. I'm going to stop there because I know we have two other presenters, one of whom is going to talk, I think, immediately after me, about the importance of reusing and recycling water and using water carefully in a permaculture approach. So I'm going to stop there and pass over to him.
Thank you, Juliet, for your nice presentation. This is something we try to introduce it in Syria, and even to create opportunities from no opportunities before for the people. Just to mention or highlight that these gardens have three types, so school gardens and home gardens and community gardens. And for me, I see also the community gardens were very successful, just for a big reason. Maybe my colleagues in science, especially, they know this. The lifestyle in the camps is so bad, and the people, they don't have any access to produce their food. So such initiatives then enable the people not only to produce their foods, but also to return to their identity. As you said, they are mostly coming from rural areas or farmers. And when we interviewed some of them during our previous research, they were very sad that they not only left or forced to leave their lands, but also to leave their work that they used to do all the time. Thank you, Juliet, again. I think we will continue to Mr. Richard to also talk about how we can use the small quantities of water in this world in such effective and efficient way. So, Richard, please introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, and very warm welcome from my side, from Oxford in the UK. I'm a member of the Realliance network as well. My background is as a humanitarian water sanitation hygiene a practitioner, and I've worked quite extensively in the Middle East over the decades, and indeed in 2017 had opportunity to work with Syrian refugees in Lebanon, so I have some familiarity. So the focus here is around harvesting and recycling water for food growing, and this is in the context of climate change. So what I want to suggest, we should first of all, when we're thinking about food system, let's think about the water demand side first of all, the crop water requirements. And of course, many of you are familiar as cultivators, but in the context of climate change, we are facing significant disruption, and that means disruption in weather patterns, rainfall, intensity of events. So it might be helpful to think carefully about perhaps cultivating different crops to the ones you're used to, and cultivating in different ways, agroforestry namely. So you might have to think to rethink what your water demand is, going back to basics. So there is guidance out here, and that FAO has produced. And within this slide, there is a link to more detailed way of estimating your water requirement. Important to think about your daily water need, obviously, to think about your seasonal water need, and the time of year your crops will grow over the seasons. And again, it's really important to stress that with climate change, this adaptation, different crops may be growing at different times and so forth. So it can be really helpful to look at this in a way which you estimate your water requirements based upon what you intend to grow at the household, school or community level. I'm now going to just to highlight just in outline, rainwater harvesting. Now, the key thing is that this is seasonal, that's obvious. But again, in the context of climate change, what we are already observing is we are observing out of season patterns. So that means that normal wet seasons, we may be facing much less rain, as you've already experienced, and we might face rain in the normal dry season. And we will also face and are facing very intense rainfall events. So a lot of rain falling at a short period of time. So we have to think about our rainwater harvesting opportunities in that context. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with the left-hand side. Number one, you can harvest water through groundwater catchment tanks. I would say that this is quite infrastructure material heavy. So there's a cost there, and that may or may not be within your reach, but there are ways of doing that. You'll see the link there to Introduction to Rainwater Harvesting that gives a way to size your water collection tanks. Probably more appropriate and more within reach is the second method, number 2, soil water retention. And this will be something very familiar to many of you, to use the bunds, contour ridges or swales. And in essence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to do minor adjustments with the soil to maximize opportunities for retaining the water that does fall during rainfall events and keep it in the ground for as long as possible. It's really as simple as that. Again, I'm sure many of you are so familiar with that. And there's a wonderful, wonderful detailed guidance from this handbook, the Rainwater Harvesting Handbook by BAFAD. And then on the right-hand side, there's opportunities for collection from roofs of buildings, or indeed even tents and plastic tarpaulins. That's slightly more complicated, but there are ways of doing that. So capturing from the hard surface of the roofs, from gutters and pipes, and then maybe having a storage above ground or below ground. So the 3 basic techniques for rainwater harvesting that you perhaps know about. But I want to perhaps move on to this area I think is more interesting and more complex. It's complex, more complex socially, it's more complex technically as well. But and this is consistent with the permaculture approach. It's this idea of reuse of the water that humans use. And the key thing about this, the key opportunity that's probably worth highlighting to you, is that where there are humans, we will have a need for, and we will use water for washing, for drinking, for cleaning, and so forth. So there's a continuous supply of these things, and that gives us opportunities for growing that we may not have through the rainfall, the seasonal rainfall, which is anyway being disrupted. So what I want to just to stress is the different types of water, so-called wastewater, and get you to think about it as a resource rather than a waste. So first of all, we have what's called grey water, and the grey water is the water that arises from washing activities. So there's the bathing activities, there's activities from cleaning plates and so forth in the kitchen, and clothes washing. We also have, of course, urine, and urine's a very valuable product in terms of the nutrients. So this is well worth collecting and using in a diluted form for the nutritious value for our crops as well. And then we also have what we call the black water, or the sewage, and this is the water that has our human feces, the excreta and perhaps urine in this. And there are also opportunities for using the nutrients in the black water by creating wetlands. Now, I really, in terms of utilizing these, the key thing is going to be avoiding high-tech solutions. I think for many of the populations you're working with, the budgets will be minimal. So low-tech solutions are more sustainable and more within reach. And a critical aspect of this is if we can keep the different streams of water, so the grey water, the urine and the black water apart, keeping them separate, this will aid significantly opportunities for use. If everything is mixed together, it becomes a big headache and you really lose a lot of opportunities. So key thing is, if your domestic and institutional arrangements allow for the separation of urine, the separation of your water from bathing, and the separation of water from the sort of the feces, the toilets. So this is critical. And looking at Juliet mentioned the different types of growing at the community gardens level, the school level and the household level. So you get different availability depending upon your type of growing and your location. But broadly speaking, looking at the green circle on the top left corner, the community gardens, you'll obviously have opportunities for rainfall. I suggest with your workers going to the locality, you would be able to collect urine as well. You're more likely to be using well water, some sort of irrigation at that level. If we look at the school down the bottom left-hand corner, obviously at a school you will have buildings or tents or some sort of roofing structure. So you're going to have opportunities for the rainfall directly on the ground, rain-fed, and you'll have also rain on the roofs. So there's opportunities to collect there, that rainwater harvesting from roofs. At a school level, there will be this grey water generated from perhaps washing in the school's kitchen and so forth. And then again, urine is another obvious source. If we look at the household level on the right-hand side, the red circle, at the household level, we've got more opportunities for the grey water and the urine, the rain on the ground and the roof catchments at a smaller scale, obviously. So this would support individual household. And I think a key thing in terms of this, the reuse of these products, in many ways, because of its social and technical complexity, if you like, it's often likely to be more successful at the household level than at the institutional level. So I would expect where you have individual households who are able to do this, that they're more likely to be able to manage this. It definitely becomes more complicated at a shared level. But it's I'm sure that for the reuse of water, the appropriateness and feasibility, cultural acceptance is really key. I do know that from the work that Shahir's been sharing updates of the work they've been doing, that there is certainly an element of grey water usage. So it has to work for people, both in terms of a cultural perspective and also an economics. If you're investing in pipes and guttering and storage containers, that has to be worthwhile. In other words, if you're paying for these infrastructure elements, that has to give you yields in terms of the crops you're able to grow. So I think in terms of ways to take this up, acceptability, first of all, we have to think about the safety, hygiene, handling and use issues. We can, broadly speaking, that grey water can be used safely, particularly if applied at the roots level. The roots of plants don't take up pathogens, human pathogens. There are issues with cleaning products, so that we would have to be concerned with. And there are some ways of filtering and straining that we'd need to include for the grey water side of things. But the key thing is application at the root level and various other things that we could look at in more detail if we had more time. I think second point is think about working your technology development together. You will find in your communities, you will all know capable people who are already doing creative things, and it can be really helpful to promote them and let other people in the community see what they're doing. Demonstrations, and of course, finally, getting your political and religious leaders to be able to explain and give people confidence that this reuse can work if managed in the right way. I think at that point, I shall end the presentation and hand back to Shahir. Let me just stop sharing. Thank you so much for everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Richard, for this informative presentation. I think the climate change is very essential when it's added to the conflict context. And most of the issues we suffer in Syria and this region is the shortage of water. So really we need to think about each drop of water, how to use it and where should it go and how we can reuse it more than one time. So thank you very much again. And we will move to Mr. Ahmed. Ahmed, are you with us now?
Yes, yes, I'm available. Thank you very much, Shahir and all.
Great.
And
great.
the greetings from
Thank
here.
you for your patience and waiting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I will be sharing my documents right now.
Yeah, please take the floor.
Yes, I think what I have just learned from different nice and rich presentations that the urban agriculture still is considered as an important response by the local community regarding the existed disastrous situation, disasters, and vulnerabilities at different levels, and these and the crises as well. Whether these crises are man-made or nature-made, in the case of the climate change, that it is actually affecting the Gaza Strip as well as Palestine in general. Sorry, I would like to present myself. My name is Ahmed Surani. I'm the coordinator of Gaza Urban Agriculture Platform. Yes, and the resilience is actually part of the local conversation at the in Palestine, especially in Gaza. As you all know, Gaza is since more than 15 years ago under a closure and siege. And we have a case or a situation of protracted crisis conditions in Gaza that motivated the farming community in Gaza, farmers, men and women, always to be and think about a more resilient resilience strategies to confront the risky situation and the difficult situations that is confronting them in their lives. Resilience is not new, actually. It is part of the local farming community culture, and when we talk about the resilience, it is actually came from the disaster risk reduction, which is also a part of the local community culture, when especially those communities living in a very hard conditions. And part of this important approach is also always there is a need to highlight and map the already existed vulnerabilities and capacities at the local community, because under humanitarian aid programs and intervention, we always think or mainly think about the needs of the communities who are in need, the needs. But it is also at the same time to think about the already existed resources, capacities, local knowledge, and to see how to make the best use of these available resources. When it comes to resilience, resilience actually is the opposite of vulnerability. And in order to reduce the vulnerability, we need to increase the capacity of the poor people who are in such bad conditions. So it is the capacity of people and communities to avoid disasters by planning, preparing for response and recovery as well. Resilience depends on social and a certain number of social and organizational skills, such as learning. Learning is really very important. It is actually part of the local culture of the farmers. The farmers by themselves tend to learn from each others, even in the absence of the agricultural extension system. In a disaster situation, the farmers used to build their own spaces to learn from each others and to try to learn and build their own positive coping strategies to organize themselves, as well as to reduce the level of the risk. There are always mechanisms to enhance the resilience of the urban communities under a crisis situation. And these mechanism, I would like to divide them in two levels. The first level is at the institutional level, where there is an important need to build a conceptual policy and the programmatic frameworks among different stakeholders on the intervention approaches and the strategies by different actors, as well as develop a genuine and balanced institutional partnerships that could promote resilience development approach, not only promoting or involving only on a very much humanitarian aid interventions and the programs. So it's very important to create always a link between developmental intervention as well as humanitarian aid intervention. That is always that is always voiced by the local communities and requested by the people, just to feel much more empowered, much more independent, and also respecting the local resources and local knowledge. Also at the institutional level, we have the exchange of experience at the institutional knowledge and develop participatory spaces for learning, monitoring, evaluation, and accountability. International and local humanitarian intervention should be launched from a more sustainable and developmental perspectives, and in this regard, shifting from humanitarian needs to more resilience development rights. So rights, even when we talk about the disaster situation, a crisis situation, in the heart of all this situation, we need also to remember the rights of the people, rights of the poor, vulnerable farmers and their communities, and how they even can advocate their rights in the heart of the crisis situation. At the community level, it is important to seek by different actors to strengthen the voice and the role of community, and not dealing with people as recipients, only as recipients of assistance, but mainly as subject and object for the process. The community-led initiatives should be considered, well-mapped, and respected even by the different actors, and we need to see how to build on these community-led initiatives developed by the local community and the farming community. Understanding and research even the local community capacities, resources, knowledge, experience, it's very important. Why it is important? Because this is actually an important resource for their power, for their voice, and for their agency. Once the farmers start talking about their resources, their knowledge, their experience, they become much more powerful and much more stronger to share all these resources with others and start building on these resources to make or to facilitate changes in their lives. The local communities in a crisis always develop their own positive coping strategies. These positive coping strategies should be also well researched and well mapped by different actors, by all of us, as well as by the with participation of farmers and farming community, to see how we can expand the knowledge about these positive coping strategies and how we can use them in a proper way. I would like to present here very quickly some models for local positive coping strategies. On the top of this, we have the house gardens. You know, house gardens in Gaza Strip, for example, at least 15% of Gaza Strip community, they have top roof or house gardens. Even in the refugee camps, you know, 70% of the population in Gaza are displaced people or refugees. Even in the refugee camps, there are still at least 15% of these families, they have top roof gardens or very small gardens around in their areas or around their houses. They are raising different types of pigeons, chickens, rabbits on the top roof of their houses to generate some income or to feed at least the members of the family with protein. Also, making the best use of the available agricultural areas in the agricultural production, and mainly by the women agripreneurs. Women have a special role, a special leading role in these small and micro agricultural enterprises, whether in the house, on the top roof, or around the house in the house garden. The local micro seeds banks, it's a well-known phenomenon with at least 10% of the farming families in Gaza. They used to have their to dry their seeds, local seeds, and to preserve it for the second season on a special shelf on their kitchen, to use it for the second or the following season. The use of vertical plantation and green plastic plantation as an intensive model for agricultural production, especially for vegetables, is well known. In Gaza, we have at least 8,000 greenhouses, and from the top roofs of these greenhouses, 50% of the farmers who have greenhouses, they have what is called a rainfall water harvesting system to collect the water in winter season and use it with at least one to irrigate their products that needs a good quality or sweet water, fresh water, using a drip irrigation system. The recycling is also a local positive coping strategy and a good model in Gaza, especially the recycling of the destroyed houses during the wars in Gaza. Along the past 15 years, we have around 4 or 5 wars or hostilities happened, and resulted with the destruction of thousands or hundreds of the houses, and there was a strong recycling for these for the rebels, and to use it for the rehabilitation of the agricultural loads, hundreds of kilometers of agricultural loads in Gaza Strip, as well as building 3 harbors, 3 small ports for the fishermen in Gaza. In the heart of all this, I think it's important to remember the agricultural policies and how to keep and continue advocating the rights of farmers, and to review and influence the agricultural policies that could affect the lives and of the farmers and their projects. We have other strategies also to continue in the social microfinance solidarity system, informal groups for informal saving and credit spread in all urban and peri-urban areas of Gaza Strip. And this depends mainly on the social solidarity as a key part of the social local fabric, social fabric in Gaza and in Palestine generally. The smallholder mobile market in Gaza by poor farmers, especially under the crisis of COVID-19, where the people cannot go to the public markets, but the farmers use their carriages or tuk-tuks or their own carriages to sell their products in the neighborhoods of Gaza Strip, in the refugee camps, etc. Graduates traditional field schools among farmers. You know, in the absence, as I mentioned, the farmers used to have their own local space to exchange knowledge, experience, to talk about marketing opportunities, to talk about the prices of the products, especially in the under the absence or the weak traditional agriculture extension system. So that is really a very important phenomenon and or strategy being developed locally here. Yes, that's very quickly. I would like to show in 2 minutes for the production of azolla in Gaza, as well as a coping strategy by women agripreneurs in Gaza to solve the problem of the fodder and the effect and the impact of the as well as the climate change. You know, in Gaza, it's a very small area, and we do not have enough spaces for the production of fodder. And this is hopefully will give you a quick idea about this important initiative, which is actually spreading in Gaza now. Just 2-3 minutes, Shahir.
Yes, please. But yeah. Ahmed, can you stop sharing the screen? Ahmed? Ahmed, can you hear me? I think Ahmed can't hear us because maybe he's away from the laptop. Ahmed? Okay, then I have to stop. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed, but we didn't saw the video. Maybe you send it to me and then I will share it for that. I think it was a technical issue. So thank you again for you and for this great also information. Actually, we are already over the time, but we planned for this emergency since we are working in emergency context. So we planned actually for 2 hours. So we have about 20 minutes if you are happy to stay with us or if you have any questions. So please feel free to ask your questions. Yes, I see, Juliet, you have to leave. Much appreciated. Thank you very much for you. Yes. Any question, any comments?
إذا بتسمح لي أنا في عندي دكتور شاهر.
Okay. Yes. Yes, please, Dr. Salim, right?
السلام عليكم جميعا والله يعطيكم العافية. أنا سليم النابلسي من الأردن. أنا تعليقاتي سريعة ورسائل واضحة وسريعة إن شاء الله تعالى. الرسالة الأولى بوجود أخي وحبيبي الدكتور باسم والزميل العزيز رياض السيد أحمد، وهي الرسالة للحكومة السورية المؤقتة من خلالهم، يعني يتحملوني، إنه لابد من القيام بدراسة للمخاطر الزراعية وآثارها، دراسة مسحية تشمل تحديد المخاطر وتصنيفها وقياسها ووضع خطة لخفض هذه المخاطر، لأنه خاصة عم نحكي عن التغير المناخي. فالتغير المناخي يعني في إدارة المخاطر الزراعية من صنفه خطر، ولكن أيضا هو بحد ذاته عامل مؤثر ويدفع بالبش أكثر على المخاطر الزراعية. فيا ريت يعني تكون هاي على أجندة الزملاء في وزارة الإدارة المحلية وجماعة وزارة الزراعة. الرسالة الثانية للزملاء في المنظمات الأهلية والمنظمات الدولية. كلنا بنعرف إنه الآثار السلبية للتغيرات المناخية بتأثر على الدولة والمجتمع، ولكن الفئات الأكثر تأثرا بهذه الآثار، ما بقول حتى السلبية، أنا بسميها الآثار المتطرفة للتغير المناخي، هم الفقراء المحليين والسكان الريفيين وأيضا اللاجئين. ايضا داخل الفئه كيف بالفقر بنقول poorest to the poor، برضو الفئه الاكثر تضررا بهاي الفئات المهمشه هم النساء والاطفال قولا واحدا. عشان هيك اذا لاحظنا انه لابد من دعم مشاريع الزراعه المنزليه والزراعه الاجتماعيه، لسبب انه على الاقل نحدد يعني نوفر الحد الادنى ما بقول امن غذائي، الحدود الدنيا بجزء من الاحتياجات الغذائيه، بجزء بالكالوريز، يعني ما راح نحكي عن امن غذائي ونكبر حلمنا، لا احنا بنحكي عن شويه كالوريز وشويه غذاء يتوفر بشكل صحي وامن وسليم وفي الوقت مناسب للاطفال والنساء. وانا بعرف انه الخبرات الاكاديميه السوريه، الدكتور شاهر والدكتور اسراء والدكتور مناف كلهم قامات علميه وعمليه كبيره، لهم دور كبير، فيا ريت تتكاتف ايدي العاملين بالمنظمات الاهليه وايضا المنظمات المانحه والجميع بمثل هيك مشروع. ونرجع للمثل الصيني اللي بيقول يعني علمني الصيد وما تعطيني سمكه، هذا المشروع الزراعه الاجتماعيه بحقق هذا المثل وهاي الحكمه. وشكرا للجميع، هي رسالتين سريعات وكل الحب والاحترام للحضور. السلام عليكم.
Thank you, Dr. Salim, for this great comments. You know a lot about our work and the Syrian context as well, since you were one of the experts worked on the governance of the agriculture sector, and I enjoyed the work with you. Yes, so thank you very much, and we are looking forward to work with all actors, if I can say this. Yeah, so much appreciated for your coming, also to see you with us today. I'm not sure how many raised hands we have. I see here Dr. Ahmed Zayed, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Shaher. Thank you for organizing this timely and important session today, and gathering all these great speakers and audience. Just a few reflections what has been mentioned by the speakers. Well, sadly, drought and extreme weather event will be more frequent and more severe and more protracted. And this is not only for Syria, but this is for the Middle East region at least. So we need to prepare ourselves, and we need to deal with the climate change as a top priority in order to avoid any negative consequences could be emerged from the climate change. I think COVID-19 situation, what we see now in Syria, give us a flavor about what climate change could look like if we don't prepare ourselves in a good way. And I think this leads me to the theoretical framework presented by Prof. Lisa in terms of how climate change is tied up to so many sectors and clusters. Climate change is related to agriculture, to waters, to social inequalities, to health, even to education. So when we need to prepare for any climate change response, we need to interact with the different sectors, with the different clusters, and we need to break the silos between different sectors. And this is one of the biggest challenge in our situation in Syria. Unless we have this climate with the humanitarian development peace nexus, it's very difficult for us to have inclusive and comprehensive response for the climate change. The second point, and quickly, I like that the word, what has been mentioned about adaptation, but I would like to add one word before adaptation. We need anticipatory adaptation. We don't need reactive adaptation, because we need to act as early as possible. And here exactly that the point of early action, early warning. We need to prepare ourselves in advance, but we ask ourselves, are we ready in Syria to have this anticipatory adaptation? I think the easy question or the straightforward answer, no. Because what Dr. Salim mentioned, we need more research, we need more data, we need more information in order to inform the local decision makers about the informed adaptation decision. This is something essential. I completely agree with all speakers. We need to adopt for climate change, but I think what we are also always saying, we need to think with the 3 criteria for climate change. Any solution, it should be available, understandable, and also affordable. We know that, for instance, solar irrigation is something could be a response for climate change, but it could be not affordable for so many farmers. So these 3 criteria we need to keep in our mind when we are proposing any sort of local solution. Again, thank you very much for this great discussion, and looking forward for more results, more studies, more information about climate change. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Ahmed, and appreciated your comments. I highlighting really the question: are we ready or not? So this is really essential question, and this is what we are trying to do to prepare ourselves and to be ready in the near future, and to start as much as possible with also feasible interventions. And here, yes, I agree. Well, maybe the conflict takes from us a lot of efforts, but really, and I encourage all humanitarian actors to support the research, to support the planning, and to also invest more in this sector, because I think also, I believe we are moved into the, as you see, early recovery, or to talk about more resilience and sustainable and development interventions, and this need experience, this need to have a plan, to have for short, for mid and long term. Thank you very, very much. The second, I see Dr. Bassem, please. Before, many thanks for Professor Lisa and Dr. Juliet. They have to leave us, and anyone will leave us. So many thanks. Appreciate for your time. We will continue to have this discussions. We have another 10 minutes. So Dr. Bassem, please.
شكرا دكتور شاهر على هذا اللقاء وهذه الأمسية. دكتور، وبشكر الدكتور سليم على الإضاءة. سرني أنه اشتغلت مع الدكتور سليم ووضعنا استراتيجيات تخص الواقع السوري. موضوع التغير المناخي موضوع مثل ما بقولوا شاغل الناس ويشغل دول، والدول الكبرى تعمل بهذا المجال. نحن بخصوص الشأن السوري أود أن أضيف يعني شيء بس هيك إحاطة خفيفة، أو لن أطيل إن شاء الله، الزملاء أغلبهم بيعرفونا. واقع المجتمع السوري الريفي والمدني واقع زراعي. الناس في سوريا ناس حضاريين. أنا درست بمدرسة ريفية، كنا نزرع الحديقة بالمدرسة الريفية، هذا بعام الثمانينات، وكنا نستفيد من الأرض. أيضا الناس الزملاء هون في مدينة إدلب يعلمون كيف يتم حصاد الأمطار ويخزنون الماء في الجب، هيك بيقولوا عنهم بالعامية، في الخزانات. يعني نحن كنا سابقا نعمل تلك الأشياء التي الآن وبتطور العلوم وبتطور الأبحاث نرجع إلى الخلف. المزارع السوري والمواطن السوري كان يلجأ إلى تلك الأساليب سابقا. هذا بالشق الأول. بالشق الثاني، بالواقع الحالي للأسف كما تكلم الدكتور سليم، نحن بحاجة إلى الزراعة المنزلية. أنا أوافق الجميع ونسعى إليها. طبعا نحن في أبحاثنا في مشاريعنا إلى آخره نريد أن ندعم المشاريع الصغيرة، نريد أن ندعم تلك الأفكار الخلاقة التي يمكن أن لا تساعد أو تؤدي إلى الأمن الغذائي، ولكن نخرج من سياسة السل الغذائي ونخرج من تحكم المانحين بالمشاريع. شكرا لكم وأسف على الإطالة.
Thank you, Dr. Bassem, for your comments. And actually, this is the background. This is the aim of such tools to be used. Depends on the culture of the farmers in Syria. And always I say, agriculture is culture. So it is very good to adopt tools that the people already know, but you support it to apply and to use this. Thank you very much. Apologize me, guys, if I not select in the right way. But here I see Ahmed Leila, Dr. Ahmed.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Shaher, for this evening. I will introduce myself and ask a question for the contributors here. I'm Ahmed Leila. I'm manager of Nawat Center for Scientific Studies. Actually, there is a question, first of all, that why for OCHA and other NGO, why they don't collaborate well with, for example, the local governments, the local governments here in North Syria, for making the food security in a better way. As we see here that not all actually, but maybe 90% of the NGOs here working not together, but actually for making just a project just to make this project, not in a way that could help in a strategic approach our food security future. So I hope that more collaboration will be in the future for this thing. The other thing I want to tell you about that in Nawat Center, which had started in 2013 in Ghouta, in the besieged Ghouta. Actually, we got experience in in food security issues, and we planned for approach. We call it the local recycling of nutrients. As an ecosystem that could help farmers and policymakers to save nutrients, especially nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, to help farmers to grow up their crops. Actually, we have a strategy that can combine human and animals and environment in a cyclic way. And by training and development, we can help the community to make an agriculture culture, so they can save more money and can recycle their nutrients locally. Actually, we have built and exploited many of this idea as a project. Some of them was in Ghouta, and now they are in North Syria. And I want to mention something that the contributors here in this evening didn't mention, that as we are specialists in fungi, we are introducing the fungi culture as a way to grow up foods, and also to save forests, lands, because you know that mycelium is very important for agriculture, that could save or reduce the uses of water, for example, because mycelium as a network can help plants in growing well. We have by the way, we have a mycelium bank for 36 strains that can be used agriculture and maybe making some other things like infrastructure and something like that. So I hope that we can contribute with each other and maybe making something better for our community here in Syria. Thank you for your information, and thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you, Ahmed, for your comment. And I think your question is reached and be answered from Anas. Actually, the SSL cluster and the OCHA clusters, I think they are doing their best. Maybe you mean there are still some lack of collaborations with scientific or research institutes or with other things. Well, this is related to the maybe the policy and the strategy of the work. But let us work together and then improve if there are any if there is any gap. There is a question for you also from Dr.
Shaher, just
Fanjit.
yeah.
Please, if you can type it in the chat box, just to move forward, because we still have only 5 minutes, and I have here Dr. Mohammed Al-Ali. Please, your comment.
Hello, Dr. Shah. First of all, thank you for the valuable information that provided to us in this workshop. I just want to highlight a few points about practical application or practical intervention that could be applied in our situation right now. I would say that as an agronomist and as one of organization's members, we applied a lot of interventions like, as we mentioned today, like compost, for example, or like also planting forage crops. Something like also DRR, disaster risk reduction throughout firefighting points during the harvesting time. Also about planting forest trees in the communities throughout cash for work activities. Also, there is another intervention that is about to support some, we call it plant nursery, which is provide this agency or this nursery by solar systems, and we got an agreement between us to get after that trees for free to plant it, and they provide also a service to look after this trees after planting it. I just want to highlight these small interventions that can help us to avoid or to reduce the effects of climate change. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Mohammed. This is great comments from you. Just we have 2 minutes because we have another meetings, and then we should close this Zoom link. The last, as I see it, from Anas. Mr. Anas, please. Anas Abu Tarboush. You raise your hand.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. تحياتي لكم جميعا من شمال غرب سوريا. طبعا كل الشكر للزميل الأستاذ أنس أبو مالك على الإحاطة التامة بواقع الاحتياجات في شمال غرب سوريا، وللزملاء الذين تكلموا بما يكفي. طبعا في ظل التغير المناخي الواضح وفي ظل ظروف الكوفيد 19 طبعا يترتب علينا جميعا العمل على عدة أمور. طبعا نذكر منها طبعا للذكر ليس الحصر منها الحفاظ على الأصناف المحلية في ظل التغير المناخي الحاصل لملائمتها للمناخ السوري بشكل خاص. أيضا الإضافة يعني العمل على استنباط أصناف جديدة تتحمل الظروف المناخية من حيث تحملها للحرارة الحاصلة، قلة استهلاكها للمياه في ظل شح المياه الخاصة بالري، طبعا أيضا مقاومة الأمراض سواء كانت المرضية أو حتى الأمراض الفيزيولوجية. طبعا أيضا يترتب علينا العمل على تنشيط العمل فيما يخص نشاط مشاريع الحدائق المنزلية لعدة أسباب، أولا منها الاستفادة من مياه المنازل، بالإضافة إلى عملية تدوير مخلفات المنزل الاستفادة منها في إنتاج يعني جزء يسير من قوت أو خضار أو حتى بعض المواد التي تساعد الأسرة في ظل الظروف التي يعيشها الناس في شمال غرب سوريا عامة والمخيمات بشكل خاص. طبعا كل الشكر للزملاء وأسف على الإطالة. السلام عليكم.
Thank you, Anas. Here we reach to the end this webinar. Thank you for all of you for your time, for your attendance to with us today, and please follow us for future webinars as well. I would like to ask all the speakers and great thanks for the interpreters for your great work. I would like to thank also the SSL cluster and all partners and donors, and many thanks to the CARA to host this meeting and provide the translation. Thank you all again. Really, we enjoyed. I hope also you enjoyed this evening, and until we see us in next webinar, I say please take care and stay healthy, and thank you very much.